of EPM Chronicles and Confessions. We're with David Watson here. David, could you please introduce yourself on your EPM journey?
Yes, thanks, Tim. I'm David Watson. I'm the Managing Director here at Concentric Solutions. I've spent the last 25, nearly 30 years working in the EPM space, which has gone in a flash, I think is the first thing to say. I started out as a JD Edwards system administrator when I graduated, working for a large American telecoms firm. Decided I didn't want to get sidelined in a subset of an ERP, and cottoned on to this world of financial reporting as an area that I felt was something I wanted to explore further. So I took up what initially started as a help desk position in the first 12 months with a company called IMRS, International Management Reporting Systems, who produced this product called Microcontrol, which was, just to show my age, was a DOS-based financial consolidation product, and they claimed was the first PC-based financial consolidation tool to market. That then morphed into what became Hyperion Software, when Hyperion Enterprise was then launched as the Windows version of their consolidation tool. And then subsequently Hyperion Solutions, as Hyperion started acquiring other vendors along the way. So I guess I've seen the world of EPM from the context of when it started as individual point solutions. And to be quite honest, my starting point was before the term EPM even existed. I think financial consolidation on its own is not EPM necessarily. And to that point, it wasn't until Hyperion started acquiring other businesses such as Alcar, merging with Arbor, and so on and so forth, where we've got this sort of HSF, strategic finance, S-base technologies in the mix, along with the native Hyperion stuff that existed at the time, that all of a sudden did we have the makings of a platform. And I think even back then, I guess that was a major shift to going from individual point solutions to something that had a little bit of glue in between those point solutions, to then having a proper platform and integrated products, and then of course the cloud generation of the same, which is more recent. So in that time frame, through my connection here with Concentric, I've obviously worked with a number of different vendors. I've worked with Hyperion and Oracle, worked with Tagetic, worked with Adaptive, worked with Lookanet, worked with OneStream, and OneStream is our predominant partner now here at Concentric, and we've grown with them over the last 10 years.
Fantastic. So the next question is really trying to explain EPM to others outside our industry. I still have a problem with my mom, in terms of what it is. So have you got kind of any stories you can share in terms of EPM related, explaining it, kind of humor?
Well, I think the easiest way, how do I explain that? So I think the way I would look at it is, whenever we bring on new team members, particularly those who have come from an accounting or some form of finance systems background, but not necessarily EPM, trying to give them some insights as to what EPM represents. I refer to it as a wagon wheel of processes. But the simpler way of looking at it is, most large-scale organizations want to actually have some horizon as to what it is they're trying to reach in terms of strategic plans. So if you imagine yourself sat inside a car, and you're looking through the windscreen, there's the future. That's what's ahead of you in terms of your plan. If you're trying to work out how the business is doing right now, you're looking at the dashboard and what's going on in front of you. If you're trying to work out what's already happened in terms of the financial reporting we do, that's looking through the rearview mirror, and so you've got the full perspective of it. To me, that's the simple way of explaining EPM. It's so much more, of course, and I think from small beginnings to where we are now with all the technology at our disposal, I think it could become quite a complicated conversation quite easily.
Yes. Thank you so much. So what's been your most significant challenge in EPM, and how have you overcome that?
So I think there's probably, I was trying to single out one that's meaningful. I think from my perspective, I think the biggest challenge we have with EPM is we've talked about the subject for 20 odd years. And it's only really in the last 5 or 6 years that I would say that the technology's caught up with the message.
Right.
And so what I've always found challenging, particularly as a services manager and owner of a consulting company in this space, is the doing right by the customer in the sense that they have an expectation of what EPM represents in their mind. And the technology's not always had the underpinnings to deliver on that message. So usually certain vendors you'll find have started in the financial consolidation domain, and therefore their suite of products or their platform, depending on how they present it, tends to have a strength in that area. Others will have started in the FP&A or budgeting and planning domain with maybe more of a business intelligence slant to it rather than a pure play financial reporting slant. And if you look at those two sort of opposite opposed conventions, trying to make a consolidation tool do multi-dimensional budgeting and planning can be a challenge depending on the product set.
Yeah.
Trying to get a very multi-dimensional in-memory planning engine to do complex statutory consolidation can also be a challenge.
Sure.
So it's trying to actually find the right tool for the right circumstance. And I think that's the learning I've taken from some of those situations where the EPM message is a vision rather than a reality for a lot of customers. And I think you've got to start somewhere to get there. And I think it's trying to make sure that you choose the right starting point to actually enable you to hit the ground running in the areas that are the priority for your business, as opposed to buying into the full EPM agenda day one and expecting to have all of it next week. And I think that's been the hard bit for us, particularly where we're actually trying to advise clients on doing the right thing. The right thing is to do whatever services you need for the next 5 to 10 years, not what services you need for the next 2 years whilst you've got budget to spend the money. And I think that's one of the things we come up against a lot. I don't know if that answers your question.
No, that does, yeah. Could you share a standout success story that you can share with the audience?
So I think pick one that's meaningful. If I just pick up the thread of what I've just said, actually, in terms of the idea of integrating a platform of EPM components, back in 2010-ish, thereabouts, we had a large FTSE engineering group as a customer, still do, I'm glad to say. And they were using various technologies. They had Hyperion Enterprise, HFM, S-Base, a little bit of strategic finance, a bit of Cognos, a bit of various other tools for good measure. And they had an acquisitive business model. And the challenge was to allow those operating companies to remain autonomous in how they operate, but at the same time serve the needs of the group organization from a reporting perspective efficiently. Now, whilst that autonomy had given rise to multiple business units having lots of different pieces of software, the group needed some standardization to be able to have that oversight across the business. And I think this was probably the first, if I'm recollecting this correctly, the first situation we had where we successfully took a client from what I call multiple, not just a single, multiple legacy EPM components into a platform world. And that was a challenge because it's different from taking, if I use the Hyperion examples, taking a Hyperion Enterprise or HFM and going to EPM Cloud. that you're just taking one process and moving it to the same process in a different technology
Sure.
set. If you're actually justifying the investment by migrating off a number of different technologies into a platform, then that presents a different set of challenges. And it's in its simplest level, it's people, process, and technology, obviously. But from a mindset perspective, I think the challenge that we faced at the time was trying to actually ensure that we did right by everyone while staying focused on what group required. And I think that's the challenge there, where group might have had a focus on the financial reporting piece, but equally you needed the budgeting and planning piece, the other analytics they had sat around the solution, or sat around their process, sorry, still to hold water once we'd moved to a new platform. And that required a different approach from our team as well, because us turfing up and actually talking to a client about engaging on a system implementation project that has a particular functional set of requirements is fine. Us turfing up to a client and saying we've got 4 or 5 different functional requirements all at the same time, even though this one over here might be the priority, if we didn't do that right, the one that gets the priority becomes the only focus of the project, rather than the other elements that still need to be considered. So I guess the learning we took from that was our consulting approach had to adapt as well, where it became that the move from individual point solutions to a platform play now means that you have to invest so much more effort in the upfront discovery and business requirements and ask the right questions then, before you embark on how you phase the delivery of whatever technology you decide to deploy. So that's a rather long-winded answer, but I think that's the best example I'm thinking of is a Leicestershire-based engineering group that we work with, FTSE 100, and they were very much a success story in the context that we got them onto OneStream, as it happens. But that wasn't just a simple migration from A to B, and it's actually being able to assimilate the moving parts and do it in an integrated way.
Fantastic. So what's the most rewarding part of your career?
Oh, well, that's a hard question. Well, again, when we take on new people into the team, one of my interview questions tends to be what gets you out of bed in the morning, and you have to ask yourself that, otherwise you wouldn't still be doing it 25, 30 years down the line.
Sure.
There has to be a purpose to what you're trying to do. And if there isn't a purpose, then you're just making up the numbers. And I think from our perspective, I think it's a combination of seeing the transformation we achieve on certain customer accounts, knowing where they started. Often as not, they've had that point solution mindset at the beginning. We've taken them through an advisory journey to understand what's available out there and actually help them broaden their horizons a little bit, because as I'm sure you'll be very aware, there are very few technology sets now that just do one thing. So if you're actually trying to weigh up how you assess one versus another, then trying to get that client to open their mind a little bit as to what they're also investing in, even if they're not going to use it straight away. So I think the in terms of that side of it, the most rewarding element has been taking certain clients that we've got, one in the food manufacturing industry in particular, on a journey from not wanting anything other than just a replacement for HFM to a full platform play that where their team's been really excited about the prospects. We also have another project in a similar vein in the transport logistics industry, where again it was a simple. They were actually still on Hyperion Enterprise, believe it or not. So we've got them onto a modern platform, and they've really bought into the opportunity that gives them. Now they're challenging us on procurement planning, on various other things, ESG, other initiatives that would never have been on that original agenda had they just looked at it from a simple technology replacement perspective. So I think the hardest thing to get right is to judge what's right for the client, in the sense that some customers are not needing that big complex platform.
course, yeah.
Others have that roadmap and vision of where the business is going, where it's absolutely going to support their journey. And it's trying to actually make that right call at the right time. So I'd say that's been rewarding. And then if I may give you two answers to that. The other one is we made a conscious decision as a firm, just the early stages of COVID, to change tack a little bit as business. We wanted our focus to be even more customer centric than what we were before, rather than being the mouthpiece for specific vendors, if I dare say. What we wanted to be was understanding of the fact that we needed to have the knowledge in the team to actually start taking on other areas just around the edges of EPM that may not have been mainstream, if I dare say. So when we start looking at the sort of process intelligence world around pre-processing your data and working out what your process bottlenecks are before you get to the EPM piece, and then at the other end of the scale, looking at the data visualization and analytics and dashboarding and such like, technologies that come in around that. You've also got AI, machine learning, as a core that sits around a lot of that. And so one of the other rewarding things I would say is we moved to Eel Science Park University campus back in 2020. Just in the last 6 months, we've moved into the new Digital Society Institute. We're the first commercial tenant here. Fantastic facilities. But the reason for doing that is we want to tap into the 250 master's graduates that are coming out of the university a year with AI and data science qualifications. And I found that rewarding. We've done it for the last 2 years. You start to feel old when they say stuff to you and it goes over your head and you suddenly realize that you haven't a clue what they've just said. And that to me is great because I want to make a point of, I find it rewarding bringing people in to the team that are better than I am at what we're trying to do, because you have to do that, and particularly with those young folks that have got that finger on the pulse in terms of some of those emerging technologies.
Fantastic. So another quirky question. Have you had any unexpected or funny moments you can share with us in your career?
Yes, a few over the years. Trying to think if I go back in time a long while, one of my very first consulting gigs working for Hyperion, I was sent to Tel Aviv in Israel to do a Hyperion installation. And here was me as my naive consultant with about 12 months of consulting experience at the time. Great, off to an international client, and got off the plane, got taken to the customer with my box full of floppy disks, because we didn't, that's how we did installs back then. And, I had the process of installing the software in memory almost, and we'd done it so often. Arrived at the customer, very friendly. So we need it installing on these machines, this server over here. There you are. We'll leave you to it. And then they disappeared, and no one was there. So then I went onto the machine, and I thought, oh bugger, it's got a foreign Windows on it, and it was a case of, right, well, I'm going to operate from that memory, muscle memory, if I can call it, and we'll get through this. So I did that. Got some of the Hyperion install up and running, and then spent the next hour and a half on the first machine, which should have taken about 20 minutes, going round and round circles, following what I thought were the prompts for this installation routine that Hyperion had written, and getting nowhere until eventually I had to admit defeat and call one of their IT guys to say, can you help me out here? And basically what it was is, and this was an object lesson in not assuming, what it was back in the day, and even nowadays, I think, you get situations where products are written in one language and then translated.
Yeah.
And other situations where products are written for that language I had properly localized from the outset. And this here was a classic example where there'd been a mix and match approach to the install routine. So OK and cancel were the opposite way around, depending on which screen you were on.
Oh no.
So it took me about 2 hours to actually, so once I worked out what the actual hieroglyphics represented, I could actually complete the install. So that would be my one I'd put out there as a funny sort of reflection on my time as a consultant in early days. So
Cool. So you run a very well-known and successful consultancy in the UK. What was the inspiration to start this?
So I worked with Hyperion up until January 2007. And in the months running up to that, we went through all the usual pains of a large firm that's preparing itself for sale, not telling the staff that that's what was happening. So I knew something was coming. I had silly targets, no budget, all the usual stuff in that respect. And, I just reached a point of frustration, I guess, where I thought it's time for change.
Right.
So I actually thought it was IBM that was going to acquire Hyperion rather than or as it turned out to be Oracle. So I got that wrong. Albeit I'm not sure that would have changed my decision at the time. But no, just going 2 years prior to that point of me leaving back in 2005, Concentric had been formed by 3 independent consultants that I had melded together as outsourced suppliers of services to my team at Hyperion. And one of them had decided he was leaving the business for family reasons to go back to Australia. So I decided it was opportune to take over his stake in the business. And at the same time, I brought some of my colleagues with me from Hyperion. That's how we got started properly, early part of 2007. The reasoning why I was doing it, because I guess I could have done one of a number of things, having spent many years running, I think at about 25, 30 people in the team then. So, going to 2 or 3 people and their dog was a bit of a contrast. But what I saw at the time was a real opportunity to focus on the customer service element. That's been true to us throughout, thankfully. It's embedded and ingrained in our culture in terms of how we do things. But I think that focus on what's right for the client was sometimes not always the number one priority if the sales team were trying to sell some software within a software vendor. Sure. And that's the same, I'm sure, for a lot of software companies. That's why they're in business, is to sell software rather than necessarily to, be completely transparent as to what the customer's walking into when they start an implementation. But we'd had a few situations where I thought, no, we could do this better. And actually, if we did it better, not only would the client invest in more software, but actually they'd do it in a manner where it was aligned with how they wanted to grow their use of technology within their business. And that was the driver, I think, for us setting up properly with Concentric. Oracle, in its wisdom, mandated that we take on a software resale target in order to be a partner. So we did that reluctantly because we didn't see ourselves as salespeople. Right. But I think what that taught us very quickly was the fact that we weren't scary salespeople, and the fact we were consultants and knew our domain area. The customers trusted us, and there's that bond of trust that we could relate to what they were trying to achieve. And as a consequence, over that next 2 or 3 years, our software sales number grew and grew and grew to the point where we eventually had to start hiring some salespeople and then a marketing department to follow. So we've kind of incrementally grown over that time, off the back of small beginnings, but it was intended only really to make sure we did right by the client. It's why it goes back to that question: why do you get out of bed in the morning? What value, what motivates you to actually go and do what you do? I wasn't always seeing that latter days at Hyperion when they were just about to be acquired, whereas this was a fresh challenge.
Fantastic. So the industry is very fluid, a lot of things happening, and you've gone with various vendors in your time, and also you're very much vendor open now. How do you stay abreast of all the things that's happening? What's your kind of, source of information and stuff like that?
Well, I think you'd have to be asleep on a mountain with no internet signal to not realize there's lots of traffic on LinkedIn about everything related to our industry. So that is obviously a natural source of the latest and greatest is out on such and such a platform. But I think putting that to one side, that's more coming at it from the vendor perspective, coming at it from the client perspective. I think what's more important to us is actually understanding what the client's trying to do. And then, what we need to be cognizant of is the fact that we may have done something a particular way that way in the past doesn't mean to say it can always be done, it always has to be done that way going forward. And as new technology emerges and being able to actually look at alternate approaches to achieving the same aim, that to me is part and parcel of what we have to do. So some of our team are tasked as domain leads in keeping abreast as individuals with what's going on each of their subsets of the EPM spectrum. So I don't try and do that as a sort of, I'm font of all knowledge on this. We subdivide it across our domain leads, where we'll have people looking at planning domain, people looking at financial close domain, people looking at analytics, people looking at automation and AI, etc. And it's trying to make sure that we respect the fact that each of those has its own areas of knowledge specialisms, where to pick up on the nuances of what's going to make a difference, you actually need that expertise to be able to translate that into something that's meaningful to your client at the end of the day. And that probably took us too long, if I'm being honest, to recognize. We probably tried to lead from the top without recognizing that actually it's the guys on the shop floor working with clients day in, day out that understand what the clients want. So.
Sure. Yeah. Thank you. So this is quite pertinent to yourself and quite relevant, I guess. There's a lot of newcomers coming to our industry, and you've moved to Kiel, and you're looking at also. What's your advice to beginners in this industry or novices who are looking at this industry?
So the first thing is you need to decide what you want out of it, I think, because there's different paths that you can take. If you're technically minded and there's the technology piece that motivates you, great. If you're into process transformation or business change, then that's also great, but that's a different slant on the same part of the puzzle, if that makes sense. And so first off, you need to decide whether you think your motivation to get involved in this is about a technical agenda. So you want to be the best of the best in a particular technical area, or whether actually you want to be that change advocate or enabler for a customer. And if you look at it more from that sort of process perspective, you need the technical skills as well to be able to offer that advice and guidance from a change perspective. But perhaps you're not going to be in the weeds of every technicality. You'll have others that will probably focus on that. So I think that first decision is, where do you see yourself? Do you see yourself as that sort of change enabler that needs to understand business process as well as the technology? Do you see yourself as a technical specialist because you enjoy playing with the technology itself? Or do you see yourself becoming a project manager or some form of program manager for larger EPM implementations? Again, slightly different slant. The ladder to get to each of those is going to be different. But the first thing I would say is everyone has the same foundation. And that foundation, to me, and again, I'm touching on what I say in an interview, I have what I refer to as my three-legged stool approach to recruitment. And that is, aside from the fact that I don't want someone to walk through the door looking as if they've got two heads, they need to be able to have good interpersonal skills and understand how they can engage with the audience they're working with in the right language. So if you can't do that, then you've got some learning to do to understand how do I gain that understanding from a domain perspective to have the right process discussions with the client. Some of that might be accounting. Some of it might be much broader than that in terms of how a business does operational reporting. On the technical side, we need people to, that's the second leg of my pillar, or three-legged stool rather. We need people to have the right technical skills.
Yes.
So again, you're not going to walk through the door day one with everything, and it's knowing where your strengths and weaknesses are. Focus on keeping your strengths up to date, but give yourself a plan for how you're going to get yourself to that next level in terms of the technical skills that you would need in order to become that expert. Now, I think from our perspective, what we would typically do as well, excuse me, is the third domain is the financial accounting and business skills that we would look for. And again, the mix of that, which side of that three-legged stool you veer towards, would probably dictate which path you would take if you were joining a firm such as ourselves, or wanting to work in industry in one of those sort of domains, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
So my guidance is don't try and take it all on at once.
Yes.
Is, keep it simple, but give it some focus, but create yourself that roadmap of which path you're going to take, because then EPM is too big for one individual to know everything.
Sure.
And I think that's the world we live in now.
Cool, thank you. So, as aside to onto this, EPM is changing. There's a lot of things happening at the moment, and you've been here quite a long time in terms of the industry. What do you think is going to happen in the next 5 years in our industry?
So I think it's kind of hard to ignore some news channels all over the internet around chat GPT, AI this, AI that. I think inevitably there's going to be a move towards introducing automation that helps inform the user.
Yeah.
Do I think it's going to take over from what a user does? No, I don't. There's always going to be a need for that sense check from a human intervention perspective to make the right decision. But ultimately, I can see, certainly in the areas around, compliance and control, a lot more rigor being applied around AI potentially. And I think also, if you look at it from a sort of machine learning perspective, the use cases for that right now are quite embryonic. And I think that's where the exciting opportunities lie going forward, because us as accountants, the starting point is A plus B equals C, and that's got to be auditable. Not A plus B might be C because this machine in the corner told it that's the outcome it's come up with. But that's a world we're moving to, where we've got to learn to trust the technology.
Yes.
But at the same time, we've got to educate the technology or train the machine in terms of that machine learning. And I think the use cases that we can apply that technology to are not that well defined right now. And I think that's how things will grow over the next 5 years, without a doubt. I also think that the adoption of that sort of technology is going to be highly dependent on whether the software vendors can, dare I say, democratize it in a way where you don't need an army of individuals to actually operate that as a technology platform. Because if you do, it's going to be the preserve of much larger organizations rather than a tier 2 or smaller, organization. And I think it's certainly the case from my experience that the larger organizations are not necessarily the most complex. You get some small companies that are very complex.
Sure.
So it's not a question of scale. It's a question of organizational design and what they do as an organization, for what they trade in and what they produce or what service they make, what service they offer and what products they make. Sorry, but I think the opportunity in front of us is actually to look at how we intelligently adopt that technology without it becoming the be all and end all. Because at the end of the day, we've still got to look through that windscreen. We've still got to look at the dashboard, and we've still got to look through the rearview mirror, if I dare say. We might have flashier, dashboards in front of us and, cameras on the rearview mirror rather than wing mirrors. But at the end of the day, it's still doing the same stuff. And you need people who have got that fundamental skill set to be able to interact with that in a productive way. That's a bit embarrassing. Sorry. I'll cut my phone so I don't get interrupted. Apologies.
Fantastic. No. Thank you so much for that. It's really insight to everything, that I've asked, and, really great. Hopefully we'll do podcasts in the future. Have a good day. Thank you so much.
Lovely to speak with you again, Tim.
Thank you.
Cheers.